This is the SF Productions Podcast Network.
The Tonight Show, a history of turmoil.
From the Pop Culture Bunker, I'm Mindy.
And I'm Mark. You can check out our audio podcast, How I Got My Wife to Read Comics, on iTunes or our website, sfpodcastnetwork.com.
Do you know, Mark, I hardly ever watch The Tonight Show.
Yeah.
I'm just telling you that up front.
Well, I watched it when Johnny was on, of course. Now, right now, there's all these things going on with the handoff with Jay and Jimmy and yada, yada, yada. Mm-hmm. But as we'll talk about, none of the handoffs for The Tonight Show have really ever gone smoothly.
When they've changed hosts, it's always been a turmoil.
Exactly. Now, the show was created by Sylvester Pat Weaver in 1954 as a companion to The Today Show. Kind of like, this is what you watch in the morning, this is what you watch at night.
Yeah.
And he also created The Today Show. He also had a third show called The Home Show, which is the predecessor to basically all daytime television.
So we have him to thank for Kathy Lee and Hoda.
Yeah, basically. Now, prior to that, he created a show called Broadway Open House, 1950 to 51, and this was really the first late night show. This guy named Don Creesh Hornsby was supposed to host, but he died 2 weeks before the premiere of Polio.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Jerry Lester ended up taking over the hosting. There were sketches and Broadway performances, not really much of a talk show at all.
So no real guests
more
or
like
couch or anything.
Yeah, more like a variety show. It's mostly known for Dagmar, this busty model who came on and played this dumb blonde character, and she ended up becoming more popular than the actual show was.
I think that name is familiar, but...
Yeah. So, moving to the first version of The Tonight Show, Tonight starring Steve Allen, 1954 to 57. Started as a local show in New York City. The announcer was Gene Rayburn, who later would go on to Match Game.
Match Game!
And band leader Skitch Henderson, who would end up later being Johnny Carson's first band leader. This show was much closer to today's late night shows. You had a panel, there was a monologue, what you'd expect to see. The show became so popular, he started a Sunday primetime show in addition to The Tonight Show.
Well, that seems sort of familiar.
Yeah. So Ernie Kovacs ended up taking over 2 days a week of the late night show. And Bill Wendell was his announcer. And of course, Bill Wendell ended up being Letterman's first announcer many years later. There was a big feud between Steve Allen and Ed Sullivan over guests and who they would manage to get on and what the acts were and all this. And
with the primetime show.
In the primetime show. And so, in the end, NBC forced Allen to leave the late night show in order to concentrate on a primetime show. Slightly familiar to what happened just a few years ago with Jay. So, we move on to America. It was called Tonight, America After Dark, 1957. This was actually a news and feature show very similar to the Today Show, hosted by Jack Lescoulie, who was one of the Today Show hosts. I don't know, apparently he did both shows, which seems like, wow, that's a long... They must take a nap in the middle of the day.
Maybe you just stay up from 11 o'clock at night to 8 in the morning or whatever.
Then you sleep during the day.
Yeah.
And then Al Jazzbo Collins took over. The show only lasted about a year. Didn't really work out. So we move on to Tonight starring Jack Parr, 1957 to 62.
And this is the direct precursor
to
the first Tonight Show.
Yeah, this was officially the first Tonight Show.
Yes.
The announcer was Hugh Downs. Later would go on to do 2020, and he's retired now, I believe.
I believe so, yeah. Band
leader was Jose Melis, and Jack Parr tended to have more important guests as well as entertainers. At one point, he interviewed Castro, and he did a show from the Berlin Wall. He had a famous catchphrase, "I kid you not."
I kid you not.
I kid you not. And he's mostly known, or best known, for the WC incident. So, WC
water closet.
Is a water closet, other word for toilet. But in 1950s, you couldn't say toilet on the air. You couldn't even say water closet. You couldn't even say WC. But he said it in a joke. The show was censored. They censored out that joke. And he was so mad that the next night he left in the middle of the show. He did his monologue, he sat down at the desk, And then he basically said there must be a better way to earn a living. Walked out. Hugh Downs had to end up finishing the show for him because it was a live show. And then he went on this long European vacation, and NBC couldn't find out where he was and all this. And he finally came back, and he started his monologue with, as I was saying. So he became very emotional on camera. So it ended up he really couldn't handle the rigors of a nightly show. And he ended up moving to a weekly primetime show, which he did until like 65. So then we moved to The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson from 1962 to 92. Now, what's interesting here is he was actually forced to complete an ABC contract first. He was doing a game show there called Who Do You Trust? With an announcer, Ed McMahon.
There you go.
So it was this cheap little game show, but ABC wouldn't let him out of his contract until it ran out. So for about 6 months, there were varying hosts just covering his guests. This show was less cerebral, more entertainment, very much the template for shows you see today. As I mentioned, his announcer was Ed McMahon with the famous catchphrase, "Here's Johnny." And he had band leader Skitch Henderson, who I mentioned earlier, and then Doc Severinsen with the Wild Jackets. He had a lot of famous characters he did on the show. He did Karnak, which was he wore a Swami hat, and there were envelopes, and there was a mayonnaise jar on Funkin' Wagnall's porch, and he would figure out what was in the envelope. You know, and they were all jokes. He did Art Fern, which was this bit where he would host this late night movie show.
Yes, but in any case, he was on the air for 30 years.
30 years, yeah. And one of his famous catchphrase was, of course, it was so warm today in Los Angeles. How warm was it? He became better known for guest hosts over the years. He had many, many guest hosts. At one point, he insisted that they were showing weekend reruns of the show at late night. And he said, I don't want to see this happen anymore. Did this in the mid-'70s. So the reruns were replaced by Saturday Night Live, which is still on the air, of course. There was a contract fight in 1980, which ended up going to court. And when he returned, the show was now 60 minutes instead of 90 minutes, and Carson owned the show.
Excellent.
Until then, NBC owned it. Joan Rivers, at one point, she was the permanent guest host. She went on to do her own late night show, and he shunned her, and she was never on the show again.
Yes.
Now, when it was time to retire, Johnny really wanted Letterman to be his replacement. He never came out and said it. But Johnny didn't even mention Jay by name in the final episodes. He just said somebody else is going to take over the show. Johnny even sent Dave jokes after he retired so Dave could do them in his monologue. But NBC ended up wanting Leno. And all this really is because Dave had attacked GE on his NBC show. And it all goes back to this one bit he did where when GE took over NBC, he took over this fruit basket to GE headquarters, and he wanted to give it to the CEO, and the security guard wouldn't let him in the building. And that started the feud. If that security guard had been smart, we probably would have The Tonight Show with David Letterman. There are whole books about the machinations that happened at this time. All right. Then we move on to The Tonight Show with Jay Leno, 1992 to 2009, 2010 to maybe 2014. Various announcers, various band leaders. In 2004, Jay announced he's going to step down in 5 years because he wanted to avoid all the problems they had in the previous handoffs.
Yes.
So Jay ended up moving on to a 10 p.m. nightly show from 2009 to 2010, which quickly flopped. And this was actually the beginning of the downward spiral for NBC as a whole.
Yes.
So NBC wanted to give him a 30-minute show at 11:35, but that was a problem because they already had The Tonight Show with Conan O'Brien, 2009 to 2010, announcer Andy Richter, band leader Max Weinberg. It was never highly rated, and Conan said he would leave The Tonight Show if it was pushed back.
It wouldn't be The Tonight Show
It would be
anymore.
The Tomorrow Show.
Yes.
So Conan left, and Jay took back over. Conan got $45 million to leave NBC, went on to TBS. And in the beginning, at least, Jay ended up with lower ratings than Conan actually had. So it was all a mistake. Which leaves us to the potential, and it was announced, but we'll see if it actually happens, Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon starting in 2014. The rumors of this change started weeks before the announcement. Jay slammed NBC on camera before the announcement. So who handles NBC marketing?
I don't know.
It's just, it's a mess.
Insane.
It's insane.
You can check out our audio podcast, How I Got My Wife to Read Comics, on iTunes or on our website, sfpodcastnetwork.com. From the Pop Culture Bunker, I'm Mindy.
And I'm Mark. Thanks for watching.
Bye.